Okay. So the third category was categorically excluded activities subject to 58.5, and those include acquisition, repair, and improvement under 20% capacity. Activities requiring an environmental assessment, which are new construction activities and substantial improvements that are greater than 20%. The last one is the environmental impact statement, and this is a category for significant impact on the environment. So this form is in your packet under the environmental section. This is a certificate of exemption, and it must be included with all projects. So if you look at the form, at the top there is some information that's needed, and then there's some boxes with check that you're supposed to check in the second portion. And at the bottom, the signature is required. Can somebody tell me who's supposed to sign these forms? Right, the chief elected official. So your mayor, parish president, they should be signing these forms and also dating them. At the top part, CDBG must be checked. The funding amount must be entered, and you have to read each one of the selections. At least 3 boxes should be checked every time you complete this form. The next form is the compliance documentation checklist. This is also included with all projects, and that form is also in your packet. You're going to read each one of the questions thoroughly and confirm that all of the answers fit the scope of your project. So one of the questions asks you something about code. So this link on the slide is for the coastal zone barrier map, and that should be attached to this form. The next one is your statutory checklist and worksheet. Those are also included in your packet. The worksheet must be completed because the worksheet directs the grantee to know what should be put on the checklist. So if you look at the checklist, there are different areas. There's a box A, a box B, there's a compliance finding section, and there's a source documentation section. The compliance finding section should state what was included in the response from the agencies. The source documentation column should include both copies of the letters and the dates that match each letter that you sent out and each letter that you received. So if a map is referenced, the date on the map and the map number should be included. Under each set of questions on the statutory worksheet, it will let you know, depending on the responses to the questions, whether you should check box A or box B on the checklist. So now I'm going to go into each area. On your worksheet, there's different compliance areas. The first one is historical properties. So there should be a letter sent to SHPO, which is the State Historic Preservation Office, and a response letter received back from SHPO. Both of those should be included and referenced on your checklist. If the tribe should be contacted, the list from the TDAT should show, it should be included, and it should show every tribe that you contacted. So if the list shows that you should contact 2 or 3 different people from one tribe, each one of those letters should be included, and you should send a copy to us to let us know that you sent those letters out. All letters and dates should be included on the statutory checklist. And if a cultural research survey is requested by a tribe, please consult with OCD on a timeline and extension request. These start at a minimum of 45 days, and they could take a little bit longer. So we'll help you get the extension request for that you would need. Floodplain and wetland management. So for floodplain management, the FEMA website should be utilized, and that's where you'll get your floodplain management map, and it'll show you if the project is located in a 100-year, 500-year, or floodway. And if they are in any of those 3 areas, you would have to complete an 8-step process. The next area is wetland management. And for this, you check the USFSW map, and I have the link included for that. And it'll show you if there are any wetlands in the area or adjacent to the area. And if either of those are there, you have to complete an 8-step process for that as well. So a general overview of the 8-step process. Step 1 should be reviewing the site and ensuring that the project is needed. Step 2 is the early publication with the 15-day comment period. Step 3 is, can the project be avoided? And you should list reasons why it cannot be avoided. Step 4 is the permanent adverse impact of the project. Step 5 requires minimization of project impact. And then step 6 is a re-evaluation of your alternatives. Step 7 is your final notice publication with a 7-day comment period. And then step 8 is proceed to project implementation. So if the 8-step is needed for both wetlands and floodplain management, then you can include both of those in one 8-step process. You just have to make sure that in step 1, you include your findings for both. Also, make sure that on your worksheet, you reference that you had to complete the 8-step process, what were your findings, and then your source documentation would say 8-step process. For our maps, the wetland map, the floodplain map, that's 2 of the maps. But you also need a coastal zone map, a coastal zone barrier map, a sole source aquifer map, and an environmental justice. One of our staff, Layla Argray, did a video that's on our YouTube page, and it shows you, I included all of the links on this page, but there's a video online on our YouTube page that shows you exactly how to get these maps. And she goes into detail as far as once you get on the website, what you will see, what you need to click. The next section is the endangered species. So for this section, you have to have a USFSW report, and this is the link to get that report. If the report yields that there are any findings, you have to consult with the agency, and a memo is required by the chief elected official. All letters and memos should be referenced on the checklist and include the dates as well as the findings. So if you contact the agency, you would put the date that you contacted them and sent them a letter, and then the date that they respond to you, that letter should also be included in your source documentation. The next area is the wild and scenic rivers. The grantee should include a map that shows the distance from the Sabine River. Right now, the only wild and scenic river we have in the state of Louisiana is the Sabine River. So you should send in a map of Louisiana showing the distance from your project to that river. And there's also a list of rivers that are currently being studied, and you can use this link to access that list, and you need to send in a list and reference both the list and the map on your statutory checklist. The next section is farmland protection. There are several ways to document farmland protection. You can include a determination that the project does not include any activities, including new construction, acquisition of undeveloped land, or conversion, and that the project would not potentially convert one land use to another. Evidence that the exemption applies. Evidence supporting a determination that important farmland, including prime farmland, unique farmland, or farmland of statewide or local importance, is regulated under the FPPA. And then documentation of all correspondence with NRCS, which is the agency that's over farmland protection. The next area is airport hazards. And for this section, you should include 2 separate maps. One is for civil airports, and then one is for military airfields, I'm sorry. Both maps must show the distance from the site to the airport. So if there are any in the area, you should show the distance and not just say that it's not within a certain amount of feet. I think it's 2,500 feet. And those maps can be accessed either at airnav.com or Google Maps. Other compliance areas that are also on the statutory worksheet is the air quality section. And for this compliance, you would need a non-attainment list for the state of Louisiana, and that list will tell you if the area of your project is in an attainment or not. The noise abatement and control and explosives and flammables, both of those refer to your project description. And on your checklist, you should list for your source documentation that you're using your project description. So I know a lot of people put different things in that area, but it should say project description because that's what you're referring to for compliance. The last section is the contamination and toxic substances. So we used to require that you do NEPA Assist search and a NEPA Assist map, but this year we're changing it. And so there's a new system called Netro Online, which is a search database that you would enter your project location and it'll yield results for that area. And you're gonna include that with your environmental review as well as the NEPA Assist. And both of those websites are included. The environmental assessment. So this checklist should be completed and signed, all questions completed and signed by the responsible entity, which is and then make sure that the person that answers the questions have knowledge in that area. For example, the school board director should not be answering questions about the soil and the past. Also look closely at the questionnaires. I know some consultants provide questionnaires to different people in the entity. If the questionnaire is answered a certain way, you need to make sure that those answers match the environmental assessment. Revisions. So after the initial review is completed, if revisions are needed, the reviewer is going to send out a letter requesting those revisions. We just ask that once you receive the letter, make sure you respond in a timely manner to avoid delays and penalties. Sometimes a second revision letter is needed if all corrections are not correct. Once the ERR's review process is complete and there are no other revisions needed, the reviewer either sends out a permission to publish or a clearance letter, depending on the level of review. So for activities requiring an environmental assessment, there are different comment periods. So if the combined notice is published, it's a 15-day comment period. And if it's posted, it's an 18-day comment period. The request for release of funds has to be signed the day after the comment period ends. So if your comment period starts on 6/4 for a publication and it's 15 days after, it would end on 6/19. Your request for release of funds will not be signed until 6/20. Then it has to be sent to us, and the state has a 15-day comment period. So if the responsible entity signs it on 6/20, you can bring it here. That's fine. If we receive it on 6/20, our 15-day comment period will start on 6/20. And then after that 15-day comment period, we will issue a clearance of the environmental review, and you'll be done with that process. The next one is categorically excluded subject to 58.5. For these, the notice of intent has a shorter comment period. It's 7 days for a publication and 10 days for post. And it still has to be signed. The request for release of funds still has to be signed the day after the comment period is ended. So for ERR clearance, all required permits, mitigation measures, and the A-step process must be included with your notice. The request for release of funds must be signed by the chief elected official after the end of the local comment period. The ERR review will count 15 days from the day the request for release of funds is received as the state comment period. And if the entity is determined exempt after review of the documents, then the reviewer will issue a clearance. Permission to publish won't be needed. All activities must be environmentally cleared, including those funded by private funds. Until the state has approved the request for release of funds, no work can take place. Whether you're paying for it or we're paying for it, nothing can happen until this is approved. This regulation is triggered when the grantee's application is submitted to the state. Revised environmental review records. So if the project or site location changes or any scope of your project changes, you need to contact us because your ERR may need to be revised. And if you have to revise your environmental review For environmental assessment projects, if there's no change in the determinations, then you only have to submit the revised POR. But if there are changes in determinations, then or a new activity is added, you would have to post and publish your FONSI again. The OCD will review all changes once submitted and issue a new clearance for you to proceed with the project. Some common errors that we find in reviewing the environmental review with the maps, they don't include enough information or they don't include all of the required maps. So with the project description, it should always state whether the project is site specific or not. If a tribe requests that something be added to the construction contract or an inadvertent discovery clause, we need to make sure that y'all follow their request. And then not signing and dating forms that require signatures, not discussing alternatives in the 8-step process, and the request for release of funds should be on one page, front determinations, and then not making sure that the statutory checklist and worksheet match. Please make sure that you review the environmental before you submit it to minimize errors. And I also want to add one more thing. If you have a park grant, those are a little bit different than our regular PF grant. So we have forms online for just our parks program and just our HVAC program, and they're under, I think, LO Open Forms, and it's the environmental review. Just make sure you use those forms. So my name is Tanisha Favorite. That's my contact information. The staff that review the environmental review or Michelle, Samuel, Denise McGee, and